Homeschooling is on the rise nationwide, but Oklahoma doesn't keep track of how many kids are homeschooled. Our state has no regulation around homeschooling, only recommendations from the Department of Education.
Some worry it could put vulnerable kids in danger if they're isolated by their families. News on 6's Kristen Weaver takes a look at both sides of this issue.
Man, that's going to be awesome, Lydia.
A cozy coffee shop in Beggs is today's classroom for Andrea and Robert Scott's 5 kids.
We primarily school at home. We do have a classroom, and we use it often, but not always.
Taking class out into the world is part of why Andrea says she loves the flexibility and freedom of homeschooling. She says each of her kids can get individualized help and learn on their own timeline.
You inhibit innovation when you regulate because you put this one-size-fits-all program together.
Each day is different, but they say most days include basic reading, math, and core subjects, Bible study, and lots of activities, anything from crocheting to sports, music, and more.
I also run my own homeschooling group called Homeschooling, and it offers a bi-weekly chess club, and we have a Valentine's event and science fair coming up.
The Scotts are part of the growing number of families turning to homeschooling or similar learning pods or co-ops. Research from the Washington Post shows a 50% increase in homeschooling nationwide since COVID. But the numbers for Oklahoma don't exist. Oklahoma is what some consider a safe haven for homeschooling, since the state does not require families to notify if they homeschool. There's no mandated curriculum or testing and no qualification needed for parents to teach.
If you wanted from the very beginning to not utilize something like a public pre-K system, you could homeschool your children their entire childhood, and state agencies would have no idea that that was happening.
State Representative Amanda Swope says she was alarmed to learn about the lack of accountability. She points to cases like the 2015 Bever murders in Broken Arrow, which involved homeschooling. She believes oversight would help prevent violence in the home.
The right to homeschool is not the right to abuse or neglect your child, and I think people need to be willing to have that discussion.
She recently filed House Bill 4130. The bill would require families to send a letter of intent to DHS if they choose to homeschool and a reason why. It would also require an initial background check for the adults homeschooling. If passed, the DHS would create a database of homeschool families with checks for criminal activity every 6 months, and the bill would ban convicted violent offenders and those with pending cases of abuse or neglect from homeschooling.
You know, if there were an open investigation into you as a parent and you wanted to go into the school the next day and decide that you didn't want your kid attending anymore because maybe it was the teacher that reported, you could do that, and there would be nothing that would be able to stop you legally from doing that.
Yeah, a parent can withdraw their child from school without giving us much information at all.
Todd Nelson works for Union Public Schools, and part of his job involves tracking kids joining and leaving the district. Union has a form that families can fill out if they're leaving, but it's not required. In the last 5 years, Union reports losing roughly 30 or 40 students to homeschooling each year.
We are, neither for or against homeschooling. We would just want it to be a quality experience when it happens for students.
Swope says her bill doesn't include any sort of educational requirement, and homeschool families doing the right thing shouldn't see an issue with basic protection for kids.
I think that if you are doing a good job at homeschooling your children, then you have nothing to worry about. It's one simple form that you're having to fill out on a really an annual basis, if anything.
But the Scotts disagree. They think that any state interference, including the recently approved tax credit for homeschool funding, opens the door to further oversight.
This year it's, well, we'll just have you sign a form. And then eventually it's going to build up into, well, we're just going to have, you just need to fit this program.
Andrea says homeschooling in Oklahoma works because it's adaptable for everyone. She says it's helping their kids thrive.
The one-on-one, approaches that we've had for each one of our kids has been great.
But Representative Swope worries about kids who may not be thriving, and her bill aims to protect them. Kristen Weaver, Oklahoma's Own, News on 6.